How y'all doing? I'm the Watchman, and this is part 4 of the Alabaster Box, the beautiful truth behind Mary Magdalene and her precious gift. And her precious gift. Now we left off in part 3 where we see where Simon the leper had the characteristics of forgetting what God had done for him. And we see that some Christians today have the same characteristics to where they forget where God has brought them from and what He has healed them of, and they tend to judge others, and they tend to judge others who usually have bad pasts. They tend to be the harshest judges. But because Simon had forgot what God had done for him, he is forever, his disease, leprosy, will forever be synonymous with his name. And those same Christians, just like Simon, are ungrateful, and Simon showed his ungratefulness towards Jesus and what he had done. And we see in the Matthew account of the alabaster box was about the disciples, and the Mark account was about other people in the room. And we seen that those two, both of them, had the considered it a waste for Mary to give her all to Christ. And we seen it, and that's still prevalent for today, that there are some Christians who feel like other Christians are wasting, or consider it a waste to give your all to Jesus. And that's sad, because it's usually people who aren't giving their all. It's usually people who aren't giving their all who consider it a waste for you to give all of your time, or all of your money, or all of your effort, whatever it may be. But we see in the Matthew and Mark account that was the characteristic of the disciples. Now in the John account, we see about Judas. The John account is about Judas, and that's what we're going to look at. Now Judas got angry, y'all. Judas got angry because he couldn't get anything out of the situations. Now, how many Christians today get angry or will only do for Christ because they expect something out of it? Let me say it like this. Instead of serving out of love, they serve only with the expectation of a personal gain. The thought of what can I get out of this situation, or how does this benefit me? Judas and the Pharisee actually fall under this right here. What Christ said in Matthew 15 verse 8. This people draweth nigh to me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their hearts is far from me. Verse 9, Judas. But in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctors the commandments of men. See, and that, but the good thing about it was, the blessed thing is that no matter what they murmured, or no matter how mad they got, Mary didn't stop or hesitate to honor and pour her love upon Christ. And I'm glad, because I know I got to reiterate this from part 2, that I know it hurt Christ's feelings. Definitely, because he was pure love. But I know it hurt for his own followers, the disciples and other people in the room, to consider it a waste for her to spend so much money on Christ. Now that's sad. I had to pause, because that is sad for them to consider it a waste to spend so much on Jesus. And that was his own followers, supposed to be his best friends. But anyway, let's get right into it. Now, many people say that Mary didn't know that she was anointing Christ for burial. And I beg to differ. When you look at the word, I believe Mary knew exactly what she was doing. And this is what we're going to talk about right now in part 4. For Jesus stated many times that he was going to die and rise again. The first time he stated it was in Matthew 16 verse 21. You can go there, but we're going to read also one of the other times he stated it, because he stated it several times. But Matthew 16 verse 21 was the first time. And we're going to let's look at Matthew 20. Let's read Matthew 20 verse 18 and 19. Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death. And they shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock, and to scourge, and to crucify him. And the third day he shall rise again. Now Mary, who was often, always at Jesus' feet, and even ministering unto him personally, she heard this all the time. She heard him say this all the time. Now, from the first sermon she ever heard, remember the first time she met Christ. The first time she met Christ, she heard a sermon. Right after he delivered 7 devils out of her, he gave a sermon. And that sermon can be found in John 8:12 through 59. John 8:12 through 59. Now, to the very day that Christ was betrayed, Mary stayed at Jesus' feet. She stayed at Jesus' feet. And the Bible makes this known. Let's turn in your Bibles with me. Let's go to Luke 10. Luke 10. Luke 10, and we're going to read verse 38. Verse 38. Now when it came to pass, as they went, he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she said, and she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. See, there she go, still at Jesus' feet, listening to his word. And not only that, but when Jesus, you can call it being on the road, but whenever Jesus traveled and spoke, oftentimes Mary and some other women always ministered unto him. And we find that in Luke 8. Go back to Luke 8, and we're going to read verse 2 and 3. And certain women which had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom went 7 devils, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward, and Susanna, and many others, which minister unto him of their substance. So Mary used to actually take care of Jesus' personal needs, her and other women. And I had to be careful to say that, because people would take that and they will ride with it. Oh, it was just Mary and they had a relationship going. No. Mary and other women were there to help minister unto Jesus and the disciples' needs while he traveled and taught. As we see, so Mary heard a lot of sermons from Christ. So in them sermons, Christ said oftentimes, especially when it started getting close to the end, how he was going to be betrayed and be crucified. So Mary was always taking this in, and you know it had to hurt her, because she loved Christ with the utmost picture. She had 7 devils inside of her. And so when she first met Christ, she knew that he was from God. And she loved him with the love that a daughter has for her father. So she hung on to every word. She hung on to every word of Christ, every word. Now, Christ bringing Lazarus back to life was supposed to be a testament of Christ's own resurrection. Not only to Mary, but to everybody. You know what I mean? But that was supposed to be a testament of Christ's own resurrection. Turn your Bibles with me. Let's go to John 11. John 11, and we're going to look at 14 and 15. Now remember, Lazarus was Mary's brother. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Now you see, he's already telling them, we're going unto Lazarus because I'm about to do something, but it ain't for my benefit, it's for your benefit, so you may believe. Believe what? And what is it supposed to believe? Now, remember, they did not believe that Christ, they still couldn't get a hold on him dying and then being raised again in 3 days. So here, Lazarus is in the grave 4 days. Jesus let him sit in the grave 4 days before he went to bring him back alive. Because Jesus knew if it's hard for them to believe that he can be risen from the grave in 3 days, then he's hoping that maybe after he brings Lazarus back to life after being dead 4 days, that they will believe. But this still ain't the case. It still ain't the case. You know what I'm saying? Now, and it's sad, because when Christ saw Mary and everyone else's unbelief, it troubled him. It hurt his heart when he saw their unbelief, when he got there to bring Lazarus back from the grave. And we read this in verse 33. We're still in John 11. We're still in John 11, but let's read verse 33. And when Jesus therefore saw Mary weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. It hurts Christ when we don't believe, y'all. Like Mary said in verse 32, and everyone else has said in verse 37, if Christ had been there, he could have healed Lazarus and he wouldn't have died. See, they believe Christ had power to heal, but not to bring back from the dead. And it caused Christ again to groan in himself, to groan in the inside. It hurt. As we see in verse 38, after here in verse 37, the people are saying, if he was there, Lazarus wouldn't have been dead. He could have brought him back to life. But we see in verse 38, Jesus therefore again groaning in himself, because it was hurting him, because Christ knew they had put limits on God. They were thinking, oh yeah, he could have healed him, but Lazarus has been dead 4 days. You ain't gonna be able to bring him back to life. They put limits on God. Do we sometimes find ourselves putting limits on God? I know sometimes I found myself doing it, but let's get right back to it. See, they believed Christ. Again, they believed Christ had the power to heal, but not to bring back from the dead. And they especially didn't believe this after Lazarus had been dead 4 days. For they all had put limits on God. You know what I mean? Which is sad. For Jesus knew that if they didn't believe he could bring Lazarus back to life after being dead 4 days, they definitely wouldn't believe God had power to bring Jesus back to life after being dead for only 3 days. Do y'all see how Jesus purposely waited 4 days? 4 days to bring Lazarus back alive. Now he been telling them 3 days I'm gonna die and then I'm gonna rise again. So he's hoping, I'm telling you, I gotta stress this, that he's hoping like, all right, after y'all see me bring Lazarus back to life after 4 days, or that he's been dead 4 days, there should be no question that I can come back to life. But is that true? What's sad to say is the only person after he brought Lazarus back to life, the only person who believed after that was Mary. The only one who believed after that was Mary. And even then, before he brought Lazarus back to life, he's telling them, I'm only doing this so y'all will believe in me. He knows that here, okay, they believe he's a prophet and a little ways from God, but they don't really believe that he is God. That he is God in the flesh. When he says this in verse 40, John 11, verse 40, Jesus said, no, my fault, John 11, verse 40, 41 and 42. Then they took away the stone from the place where he was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. Because they still didn't fully believe. And here Christ was about to be crucified in the next week or two. So Christ knew that it was the utmost importance that they believe that he would be risen again from the dead. Because the devil had the keys to death then. But Christ wanted to show them that he had the keys to death. But Mary was the only one who believed after seeing this. Mary was the only one who believed. Now, so from that day that Christ brought Lazarus back from the dead to the day that they all sat in Simon's house, every second of each day, Lazarus was a walking testimony to his sister Mary. For real, every second that Mary's eyes, that she saw Lazarus from that moment on, he was a living, walking, breathing testimony that Christ had the keys to death. And in those days, because it was only a couple days between that in Simon's house where she came with the ointment. And in those days was when she realized that Christ was truly going to fulfill what he said, in that he was going to be crucified, be dead for 3 days, and then rise again. Now, it was customary for the Jews to anoint a person's dead body with spices and ointments. And we see this in John 19 verse 40. Where it says, then they took the body of Jesus and wound it in linen clothes with spices, as was the manner of the Jews to bury. So the first thing she came in Simon's house, it says she, not only when she came in there, go to your Bibles, Luke. Let's go to Luke. Luke 7:38, and it says, and she stood at his feet behind him, weeping. She was mourning. She was weeping and mourning, and she was crying right before she started to anoint. Now we say it was customary to put ointment on a person's dead body, and she was doing this. She was weeping and mourning and placing ointment on him. And Jesus said point blank in Matthew 14:8, Matthew 26:12, and John 12, she hath poured this ointment on my body. She did it for my burial. She did it for my burial.